get it over the link. We're live.
Hi.
Hi. No one's gonna be there yet, but
Where do you actually see how many people? Because I kept asking you.
it'll show up over here.
Oh.
It'll be right next to it, and there'll be like a little eyeball there, right there.
Oh.
Then it'll go up and
So
down.
now there is a 0 persons looking at it.
Yes, we're live with 0 persons looking. Whenever I do random ones, it's like, although I did a
That's why we
slutty
need
post
to-
and I got a bunch of subscribers by being a little slutty. It's like,
I mean,
well, it worked.
I don't know if you should be surprised that works, but I'm happy
Alright.
for you. It works, and people are paying attention to us.
All right, let's dive in.
Yeah.
You are live. Hi, Colin. Colin's color.
Hello.
Let's dive in. So you were watching this morning. We want to talk about Kyle Rittenhouse a little bit. I know everybody is, but
It's on everybody's
we have to
mind.
talk about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I suppose there's something going on right now, right?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to find. I was going to have it on and mute it.
So
I could search.
yeah, I guess I'm only really that familiar with what was going on before today, and kind of gotten into some of the nonsense out of the media over the weekend and stuff like that.
Trials in Kenosha,
Yes, in the Kenosha,
Wisconsin,
Wisconsin.
which is just like right over the border from Antioch, So like it's not like he was going over all these, state lines or nothing, because he lived right there, just 20 minutes away,
No, he did cross state lines though.
technically.
Yeah, I would think I was like quipping on like that there should be a border wall because, I mean it's obviously way too easy for Illinois illegals to make their way from the backward state of Illinois into the pristine Republic of Wisconsin.
Hey man, I love Wisconsin.
I've been to Madison and I thought it was pretty nice. It's the only time I've ever been to Wisconsin. I think I had some passengers from Wisconsin the other night. They had like really thick accents and they were really drunk, and I don't know. They might have even been Canadian, and it kind of reminded me of the Strange Brew people, with Rick Moranis. And
There was a map going around that had like the top counties in all of America that are like the top alcoholic counties, and most of them are in Wisconsin, and like the 2 counties that I've been in a lot in Wisconsin are like between the 40th and 50th most drunk counties. I'm like, yes, but there's nothing to do in the winter. Like,
yeah, I mean,
you snowmobile.
I cannot imagine doing anything in Wisconsin aside from drinking a lot of beer.
Yeah, like you can go ATVing, but you drink beer when you do that too.
Yeah, of course
like.
you do. That way, if you hurt yourself, it doesn't hurt as much because you're kind of numb from all the alcohol.
Yeah, that's the same with the snowmobile. Because they do in the winter, they'll snowmobile from bar to bar. Like their trails all go by the bars and stuff. I'm like, that's living the life, man.
Yeah, seems like fun.
Cross state borders. Yes, I agree. I think the rules are stupid about carrying and stuff, but if it's in your car, it's stupid. That's the one thing that like fuck the federal government for screwing everything. He's a good kid. I think the judge has his back. Well, it's just so obvious it was self-defense. Whether you think he was supposed to be there or not, which none of those people were supposed to be there. So like,
right. Now that is one of the funny things about it all, which I mean it's kind of going back to like what we've been talking about how like the absurdity of like all of these people on the side of the corporate press narratives, whatever else you want to label them, that there's such a laundry list of nonsense in every position that they have that once you start addressing a single piece of it, it's like you're almost by default conceding other things that are a lot more just duh. Like the fact that you're like they force you to argue that like, well, he was there because he worked there, and he, he's a kid, and he has, but it's like, wait a minute, why are we even talking about why Kyle was there when we haven't even like, as if that sounds like we're conceding that anybody should have been there. Like, you're just saying, like, obviously people are allowed to be in Kenosha, Wisconsin, but it's kind of like not generally accepted that your business in any town is like setting dumpsters on fire and breaking out windows and stuff like that. It's just, I mean, that's the thing that just, any sane person is not going to skirt over the fact that like that shouldn't have been happening in the first place. And when you are fully aware that all of that shouldn't have been happening in the first place, it's kind of hard to start like focusing on why this particular kid decided to be there
Right.
in the first place. Why was he there in the first place?
Well, why was anyone there?
Well, he was there around a riot, so it seems like you can practically just deduce that was kind of why he was in that particular area of the world, was that there were riots going on and he didn't live or work particularly far from there. But then it's like, why does it even matter? Why did you, I feel like embarrassed for even being tricked into talking about that.
Well, especially when the other guy had a gun too, and was like, that's why it's like they keep trying to make this like case of like,
yeah, but
Kyle was bad for being there with a gun, but those other people who were there with a gun, that's fine.
Well, you have to understand that this Rosenbaum character was like 5'3", and so already he's at a disadvantage because he's so short. And then what's his face? I wanted to say Rosencrantz, but that's a Hamlet character. Rosenbaum, and what was the dude's name? The Gage Grosskreutz.
Oh yeah.
And he might not have been as short as the other guy, but he had a much smaller gun, and that's kind of why. That's why the fact that he had a gun isn't really that relevant, because, I mean, it's not like it's a big old, weapon of war, machine gun or whatever they.
I don't know.
It's hard because people who are so severely anti-gun, and I know them because I have them in my family, really, because they are so decidedly anti-gun, they would actually like feel ashamed of themselves if they even learned a thing. So it's like you can only imagine like the audience of these MSNBC shows and stuff like that, what the way that they interpret the words that are coming out of some of these anchor people's mouths. Like when they say, oh, I don't know, Kyle might have, he goes over there and he just unloads like 60 rounds, like unloads. That's kind of a weird term. And wait, what, like 60 rounds? That they literally said that. Like, they didn't say it like they were sure it was exactly 60, but the guy's like, I don't know, like, what was it, like 60 rounds? And then they just kind of move on. It's like, okay, so it's like there's somebody somewhere that's sitting there and is like, oh, wow, he just like unloaded 60 rounds. Like,
yeah, you didn't have to switch the mag out or anything.
Yeah, and of course they don't even know what semi-automatic means. I think that they just assume that, oh, well, I know that my grandpappy had this revolver, and when you squeeze the trigger once, a bullet pops out of it. But like semi-automatics, that means that they just spray death everywhere that you have them.
Right.
Like, it's, yeah.
Just constant spray. You just hold that trigger down and
the
bullets just keep coming. They're just in there somehow.
And I mean, it's almost silly to even talk about where you're pointing it. If you have one, then that is just automatically going to lead to innocent lives being lost.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Well, at least if you're right wing.
On that podcast you watched that showed like the CNS, did you see how that Rosenbaum he was on like all these shows. He went on all these shows and like, oh, poor me, even though he was like a felon, wasn't he?
I didn't see much footage of that actually, but that's not surprising to me at all. So he's going on the media and kind of making a sob story about himself.
Yeah, like they were all like interviewing him, and he was like, "Yeah, it's just let me see if that just might be. Oops. Yeah, he went on like one of the morning shows and was all like,
Yeah.
and then that was just Anderson Cooper, of course, that he was on.
Oh yeah, I did hear little commentary on that from these other podcasters, and one of the things that I thought was interesting that they were saying was that when he was on Anderson Cooper, I think it was Anderson Cooper, that like he just kind of goes ahead and talks about how he did have a gun, and Anderson Cooper is kind of like just shocked, like taken aback, like, you're supposed to not like be that kind of person, or at least pretend to be the kind of you're supposed like that wasn't really gonna fly, like, because he knows he's like trying to work it out, like, how do I spin this so that my audience actually likes this guy, because they kind of have to rely on this delusion from like your kind of typical boomer, progressives.
I think it's important to note, though. Gage, what are your thoughts on the trial up to this point, in particular Rittenhouse's testimony?
Anderson, it's been interesting. I think people on both sides, however you view this case, can agree with that. Specifically to the defendant's testimony, I can't say that I was one particularly impressed nor convinced.
It's not supposed to impress you.
To me, it seemed like
We're convinced you were there. You know what the fuck was
upset because they were caught, not upset because of what they had done wrong.
Now, he says he did not re-rack his gun. He said that on the witness stand. You obviously said that he did. You firmly say that you witnessed that.
Yes, absolutely.
Who is this guy? Like, is he an actor?
What was going through your mind in the moment right before you were shot?
I don't think so, but
They got to him. They had to have gotten to him.
And I felt that I needed to do whatever I could to try and preserve my own life.
I just want to play something you said in court to make sure that we have everything right. This was on Monday when you were being questioned about
do what I could to preserve my own life. You said that you pointed a gun at him before he shot you.
From him with your arms up in the air, he never fired, right?
Correct.
They're actually going to play this clip.
Pointed your gun at him, advanced at him, with your gun, now your hands down, pointed at him. Then he fired, right?
Correct. And on Good Morning America today, you said that you were.
But that's the damning point
Rittenhouse.
where
Can
it's
you
like,
clarify?
okay, we may as well end the trail right here.
Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, that was a
First and
very
foremost,
tense situation, something that I've never been in before.
but
It's
put
like
yourself in.
having never been shot before. I think it's important to note, though, that specifically during cross, and if there is a skilled attorney, they're able to present questions to help support their narrative. That's their job. And with one of the exhibits that
How ironic.
he had introduced, there's a photo of me with my gun pointed towards the defendant, either just after or right during. He had shot me in my right arm. I think it's important to note, though, that the physiology of my wound would be inconsistent with somebody being shot with their arm in, we'll say, the traditional way that you would point a gun at somebody or something.
The traditional way that you would point a gun at someone would do a different kind of damage to a person's
Yeah, so I
bicep.
guess he's saying he went like this. Oh, hold on. Keep the conversation going for a second.
She's gonna go take a call, but where was I?
Hello? Hi.
Yeah, I was like talking about how there's a conundrum from Anderson Cooper when he has somebody like this Gage Grosskreutz on his show, because this guy is he's probably like a Marxist Leninist, type person, or just, probably hanging out with those types of cats. And yeah, I don't know. I probably shouldn't speculate too much, but he ain't cut from the same cloth as Anderson Cooper or his audience. And I don't think that his audience fully realizes that kind of thing. It's like people like my own mother will will hear somebody say something negative about Antifa and be like, oh, well, I met one of those kids at the school I was teaching at, and they seem like nice kids, and they just don't they just don't like fascists, and but you know they're really sweet people. You just have to get to know them and understand them. Yeah, right. That is of course what everybody wants to believe, who has the like the signs with the rainbow colors and the science is real, and Black lives do in fact matter, regardless of what everybody who's not affiliated with my politics may think. You know, those kinds of signs. Those types of people who are always voting for the Bill Clintons and um, Barack Obamas of the world, they don't really, I don't think, fully grasp that they are not actually liberals themselves, and that b these far leftists that they want to stand in solidarity with are not as anti-gun as they are.
Okay, so I was just gonna go back. I don't know if he talked about how he said his arm getting blown off wouldn't be like if he was pointing the gun at someone. Is that what he was trying to say?
He said like the part that I caught of that did not make any sense whatsoever. Maybe there is something to it, but it sounds, I can't imagine a way of making sense of that we could even try to look at it closer and make sense of it.
Yeah.
It's like he's just, whether he did it knowingly or not, he's just taking advantage of the audience's lack of having any idea one way or the other about any of this stuff. So if it says something that doesn't make sense, they assume they just don't get it, because I think that guns are bad, and that's why I've never touched one. So they can probably just take that on the surface of like, yeah, it's like he didn't point it the traditional way at him. He pointed it the not traditional way, and that's why he was more hurtier with his arm than he otherwise would have been. Like, I don't know. I think that if a really fast moving piece of lead hits your arm, you know, it's the difference in the damage it's going to do is going to be somewhat impacted by, of course, the caliber, as well as the closeness, I guess, of the gun, as well as maybe, I guess, of course, the angle from which it is fired. But you don't really have a whole lot of control. Like, if you want to shoot somebody in self-defense and you are aiming for their arm and you want to target from a specific angle, you probably don't have the opportunity to like move to a different side of his body to get him from a different angle. The angle you're kind of stuck with is the angle like
Right.
from
and
like
he's on the
at,
ground.
like yeah, you're down here, you're like, he's right there, so I'm going to point it at him. The traditional way of pointing it, I just don't think that anything that he was trying to say could have possibly made sense.
That's what this is what I don't get. If like, I wonder if the media this guy's smarmy as fuck. First of all, like, he knows he illegally had a gun and he was there to cause trouble. You know, like the other guy who got killed, he had just got out of a fucking mental facility, and there's videos of him being an asshole beforehand and stuff.
Do they address in this segment, as far as you know, whether his gun was illegal?
Well, apparently I don't know if they say anything in here.
Because yeah, he's like a felon, and he's like technically. Because I don't really believe that felons should lose their
right.
rights,
Like, overall, we
but-
don't think. But if you're gonna bring up
but
illegal,
yeah.
yeah.
And it probably, assuming that shit is not just going to be completely fucked, which of course we couldn't be too surprised if it is, then the only thing he's likely to get charged on, given like the facts of the matter, at least the only things that you could imagine he could reasonably be charged for, is that he was 17, and technically, like, unless you're going off of some I think sort of loophole-y kind of law thing that says that 17-year-olds can have a gun just for the purposes of hunting.
This is a quote from Gage. To me, it seemed like a child being upset because they were caught, not upset because of what they had done wrong. Like that motherfucker.
Yeah,
saying that.
well, yeah, because he's telling the. I mean, it's easy enough because he at least knows enough about what the audience wants to believe that he can tell them what they want to believe, which is what you'd have to believe if you're trying to be on the side against Kyle Rittenhouse. Is that, well, yeah, he's just a really bad person, and he really did go over there with the explicit intention of killing and harming people.
But not me. Not me.
But yeah, me, I was there just trying to stand up for, black people.
Right. just burning their shit down.
There is something that really is that detestable about claiming that you were trying to stand up for people, black or otherwise, by standing up for them. You went to some random person's car dealership and started smashing cars and setting shit on fire. I'm not black, but if I was a black person, I can just imagine that I would look at that and be like, I never asked you to do that shit. Like, that doesn't help me out. Who does that help? But these people, but people want to think that that's all it was. Is these people were doing like the woke gods work out there, and this kid had to go and try to fuck it all up. I mean, in the audacity of trying to actually put out a fire, because that seems to be what provoked, because they're trying to say that he was being provocative by having a gun. But what it looks like provoked them for real was, they're like, you motherfucker, I just started this fire. Do you think I didn't do it for a reason? And you're out here like being a Boy Scout trying to put it out? Like, fuck you. Like that's what they were mad at him about and why they were chasing him, I'm pretty sure.
That's what's so scary about it, though, is like, it's like, I mean, just like all last summer with all the riots, the whole time is like the baddies are being told they're the goodies, and like,
Yeah.
And now we have a clear-cut case where one of them was, it's just so frustrating because it's like, were you okay, buddy? He did like what we would like in all of our communities. We would hope a 17-year-old would help protect our community. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
like, and now we're like, now you're not good unless you go out and like bomb shit and start fires. And there was that video like, they were literally like starting trash trucks on fire. They were starting everything on fire. But Kyle Rittenhouse is bad. Like it's getting scary. Obviously, we're in this whole world 20 months after the fucking COVID thing where logic and being good and bad doesn't really matter anymore. But I don't know. It's scary to me because then I'm like, what? You're telling, well, they already say women shouldn't carry to defend themselves because sometimes the bad guy gets a hold of the gun. So that's why women shouldn't carry to defend themselves. And it's like, that's so fucking stupid. And now you're going to say like, if a woman's in her community and she's being attacked, she shouldn't be able to defend herself, or like.
And to this case, I think I've seen some aspect of the narrative try to get into the idea that like, well, the reason why the people who were harmed by Kyle in this case were like that what they're trying to say is not because they were trying to retaliate against him with his fire extinguisher, that it was actually because, well, they saw that this delinquent, this juvenile delinquent with this dangerous weapon and no common sense was out there, and they just wanted to do the responsible thing and keep people safe by trying to disarm him or something like that. I believe that Rosenbaum guy's like they said that in the autopsy his like hand was burned, which was some evidence that I might not have that perfectly correct, but I think somebody's hand was burned who had actually like tried to grab the barrel of his gun.
So he was close.
Yeah. And yeah, that's what they were trying to do. They were just trying to protect their community by these dangerous domestic terrorists seen cleaning up graffiti and putting out fires, and and asking people who couldn't possibly have wanted help from him, to be fair, if they needed medical. Yeah, that they were just trying to do a good deed and take away his gun. So they're the good. So my point about that was that, yeah. So in that case, that would suggest that, well, yeah. So a good guy could try to take away a bad person's gun, but then they're concerned that a woman who's vulnerable shouldn't carry a weapon because a bad guy might try to take away her gun. Well, the whole point of her having a gun is just in case a bad guy tries to get close enough to her.
So I'm reading about the Rosenbaum.
She's not going to be able to wrestle herself out of that situation as likely because she's smaller.
Oh yeah, it says the close range injury, so his hand was in proximity or in contact with the end of the rifle.
Yeah. That's who his close range injury. Like, you can't just say that it appears that his hand was burned because he touched the hot barrel of a gun.
He was obviously a good guy, just getting all up in Kyle's face. Poor Kyle. And then, then it's hard to get like, was the whole thing planned? Was the whole thing a fucking setup? Because look at the crazy stuff that's going on, that we're not seeing because everything's focused on this trial, like the Johnny Hurley here, and I know for a fact they released everything during this trial specifically so that there would be less attention on it.
Yeah, I hate the fact that you must be absolutely right, and that also means that I'm kind of falling for it, because that is totally what they do.
Yeah, we don't even know what the truth. You're right, Bad Wolf.
I remember being kind of. I mean, I was definitely not the most. I was a pretty spacey kind of. My feet weren't even on the ground most of the time when I was a kid. But I remember the Clinton Monica Lewinsky stuff going on, and that was just all everybody was talking about, and that was like this big ordeal, and it wasn't until years later that I learned that they were bombing Sudanese hospitals around the time that trial was going on, and it was like, they would, the bastards, like they would get everybody focused on a question about whether the president got a blowjob from an intern while they're murdering people in other countries in such a way that they would need a distraction. Because if people were paying attention to that, they would be understandably upset. So obviously we're being distracted because this is retarded.
It is retarded. It's just so after everything that went on last year, and there was murders. I mean, some of them got charged as well, but there was murders during the riots and whatnot. But we didn't hear about half that stuff, I mean, they didn't make a big deal of it. The guy who killed what was his name? The ex-security guard, the black guy, Durden, I think his name was.
Yeah.
I think someone got charged, but it wasn't all over the news. They weren't like, oh, this nice man came to protect his friend's property and was murdered. And there's nothing about that. And he had a gun on him too.
Part of what pissed me off about when I was watching, because I didn't catch all of it, but there were long lengths of it that I was I was pretty well paying attention to the whole stream. But during the cross-examination, when Kyle went ahead and testified, the prosecuting attorney was probing him, I remember, because my blood was boiling the entire time, was when he made him say 7 or 8 times, you do know that it is not, you agree that it is not okay to use deadly force to protect property. He's like, yes. And then he kind of asks the question myriad different ways, and just tries, because that's right before he went ahead and did the slimy move where he was like, yeah, he just agreed with me. We have him on the record agreeing that it is not okay, that you are not allowed to use a weapon to defend property. And then he goes ahead and starts presenting evidence that the judge had explicitly told him he wasn't allowed to present, that suggests that there were conversations he's had that suggest that he believes something different, that it is okay to use to use a gun to defend property. And I don't really know what to make of all that. It seems like my stance is pretty much on every case is that I kind of have the attitude of a pacifist. If there's any other way, I think it's good to prefer avoiding any kind of violence. But at the same time, like, I could never criticize somebody. Like, I hate that argument that says, like, your property is not as valuable as my life, when it's like, dude, nobody forced you to try to threaten their property.
I hate that. I hate that. Even so, and some of the libertarian people are trying to say private property isn't real and shit. And I'm like, so you just sit around thinking about how you're going to take other people's shit. That's all you're doing. You're just trying to justify how I'm going to take other people's shit. And it's like the slow, obviously on the commie people side, like they've had that slow degradation of your body isn't even your right anymore to protect. Like,
yeah, that's kind of the wild thing. And I guess it's like people don't really see how their own minds can kind of start going down this slippery slope. And that's kind of why you have to stand firm on your principles, because once you start giving them an inch in your own mind, then they don't as much take a mile, but you are that much more likely to give them another mile. Like, you have to keep your thinking straight and don't let these people brainwash you. They are engaged in legit black magic. They know that what they are doing by hiding certain things and repeating certain like half truths and using this Orwellian double speak. They know that what they are doing is psychologically conditioning people to perceive the world that they live in as a different world than the one that they actually live in. And that way, from this false reality that they have people mentally existing in, they can use these people's delusions to get away with more of the shit that they want to get away with. It's people don't understand just how good the psyop is.
that guy I was thinking of is David Dorn, and apparently they have a guy arrested, but there's no trial yet. But yeah, so they have all this video. This David Dorn was at his friend's pawn shop protecting it, and all these thugs came up, and they are thugs. I don't care what color your skin is. You're a thug if you're doing this shit. Showed up and killed the man. Like, 7 people showed up. But you know what Kyle did was just god awful. What Kyle did was god awful, but what happened to this man is, it's okay. That's another thing. This guy he was trying to defend himself and property, and he got killed, and it's like they're not making a big deal at all.
Yeah, stuff just doesn't. I mean, well, that's kind of the thing. Like, I think we got into this last time. I mean, what I think we all have to really kind of realize is that, like, whatever we know what reality is, whatever we know about reality, like, it just doesn't, at least with the way that things are right now, it doesn't seem to make any difference at all. And it's hard to imagine that it would make a difference. I believe there's a way that it can make a difference. The fact that we're all more informed is probably has some potential benefit, but as long as there's like this monolithic public belief thing going on, floating around in the air, they're the ones that decide what matters and what doesn't. And I mean, it affects all of us. Like, even if we want to focus on like Daniel Shaver or Duncan Lemp, like, and we don't want to, we want to remember these individuals, and we're not going to let them just slip off of our minds, right, and become like, unimportant details. And it's like, well, we could try to remember, we could try to inform people, we could try to remind people of it, but they don't care unless CNN tells them they care. They
care.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, nobody really believes in the Epstein thing, but they don't talk about it or tell us to care about it, so we don't. I mean, we do, but we don't. It's because it's pointless for us to keep babbling about it, because it's not, nobody else listens to us anyway, because it's not the topic that we're told should have our attention.
Right.
Like the Sudanese hospitals, even if we were paying attention, what would we have been able to do?
Every criminal should fear for their for their life every time they choose to victimize another person.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly, and that's kind of the thing, and that kind of the way I like to talk about it is like, yeah, I don't personally know, and I don't think I would. I don't think I would actually use like deadly force to stop somebody from threatening my property. But I don't want anybody to think I wouldn't.
right.
Like in that case, like I would prefer if I'm perfectly comfortable with the idea that that I'm a little bit, ambiguous, and it's like, yes, I have the ability to defend myself, and you have the ability to fuck around, and I advise that you don't find out what happens if you do. Like, I think I'm comfortable just leaving it at that. And I mean, but if they call your bluff, then
That's
how do you show people that you are serious? Yeah.
Or like that guy in Washington D.C. I think he was an Uber driver or whatever, and those girls wanted to carjack him. Which, when you're a teenage girl and you're carjacking someone, you're beyond something at that. You have lost a bit of your humanity, and you are a criminal now. They get into people say, well, just give them the car. It's just property, whatever. Well, and then they slam on the gas and kill the dude. Like I don't know if you heard that story where they crashed it.
No, but but of course, right? Like, and that's exactly that kind of shit happens. And that reminds me of a different story that I was hearing about recently, and I only really know the details that I remember from this one time hearing about it. But there were like these kind of middle-aged couple, I think, that were one time robbed, and all of the evidence was pretty clear cut. Oh, I remember how it came up. I think it was like the Young Turks or something, like referenced in the incident and just completely misframed it. So whoever was pointing this out actually talked about the real story, which was that, well, what it was they were trying to compare the murderer in this case to Kyle Rittenhouse, because like this was like a black, I think 17-year-old maybe, that had I think the Young Turks said that he was convicted of the crime of murder and given the death penalty based on a like flimsy like testimony or something like that. But whoever was trying to set the record straight was pointing out, no, the evidence was incredibly conclusive about exactly what happened, and he admitted to the crime in court without any kind of like, uncertainty to what he was really saying. And there was no really, because of all of the evidence that was there's no way he could have gotten away with lying about it anyway. But ultimately, he was trying to like maybe carjack these folks. I think it involved a car. They offered to like give them a ride somewhere, and then they tried to like steal their wallet in their car and stuff like that. And I think that what I heard was that they're just begging for their lives and stuff, and they're like Christians, and like they're saying that like, please, just, we don't care if you take our stuff or our wallet or anything, just don't kill us. But they ended up killing them anyway, and then getting away with the wallet, and then using the debit card to find out that there was only $10 in that checking account. But I mean, yeah, stuff like that happens even to people who are like, yeah, I'm a pacifist and I don't believe in using force to defend property. So yeah, if somebody's going to rob you and then kill you, then maybe you should consider that it is on the table. I don't know. Certainly don't like the idea that it's just decidedly ruled out because of that utilitarian argument that says that your life is more important than your property. Yeah, that's not the point. I mean, I don't think anyone's arguing that. The point was never what is more valuable. Fuck utilitarianism. It's a false choice. I should not have to choose between your life and my property. You should be able to go on living and not fucking with me. And I should be able to go on living and not having you fuck with my property. Like, let's not.
Because they don't like their property fucked with. But maybe but then the bleeding heart is probably, oh, well, they, they've had a hard time in life and they, experienced all this hardship and abuse. So
That's the thing that bugs me when people try to argue moral relativism, which I always get into it with idiots on Twitter when that topic comes up, because it just drives me too crazy to let it go. I'm like, no, that is the stupidest idea in the world, and you need to see that. And is that they always try to talk about those kinds of details, like as if like there's no objectivity to what's right or wrong, and it's really just purely up to personal opinion. And then when you prod them on like, so I can do whatever I want and it's automatically right. No, it's whatever the current culture, society. Yeah, that's like cultural moral relativism, and yeah. So and then they'll bring up examples. Last guy I was talking about, this was probably yesterday, it brings up like, yeah, well, at one point it was right for like people to mob up and burn women at the stake, like by the hundreds and stuff like that. I'm like, no, it wasn't right. They might have thought that it was, but they were wrong even when they were wrong. But you just get into all this crazy territory that suggests, but what they can't ever seem to grasp is that there is universality to not wanting things that reasonably you wouldn't want somebody to do, like take your stuff or like kill you. Like no, there's no ambiguity to whether or not it's immoral to just somebody's minding their own business, sitting there, and they aren't a threat to you in any possible way, and just killing them. Like nobody could possibly argue that's it's just a matter of opinion that that's wrong.
right.
No, you know good and well why that's wrong. I mean, and even if you don't want to make a religious argument, like that God says that do not murder in the Old Testament or something, like, do you want? I mean, it's the golden rule, so I guess it's not biblical, but it's kind of logical. Do you want somebody to kill you? Well, if you do, then I mean, but
Maybe they
but
do.
that's what I
Maybe
hate about that too. Is I start to actually be a postmodernist and start thinking too openly about it. Like, but if you want to, then it just gets hard to talk about. If you want to die, then that's a different matter. But no, given in general, you don't want to die, and at least you don't want somebody to kill you, even if you could potentially choose to be killed voluntarily. When you haven't made that choice, you do not want somebody to kill you. So therefore, you probably shouldn't be killing other people
Right.
that don't want to be killed. Yeah, it's pretty simple, really, and I try to make it more complicated than it is. But yeah, nobody wants their stuff to be taken. Nobody wants to be harmed unless they're into like kinky stuff, but then they still don't want it
That's
outside of the
consent.
context of
Yeah.
the consent. Like,
Yeah, there's still boundaries and rules. I don't know. I was just going up on it, like you started saying, too postmodern, but like I was like, well, maybe these people do. I mean, at a certain point, when you're starting to commit this kind of crime, you obviously don't care for your life, right? Like you obviously, I don't
Maybe.
know.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's an element of that does tend to get kind of glossed over. That like I think a lot of people who are in these situations in some ways are kind of like miserable, and part of them are just like, FSU. I used to have that kind of attitude. I was never like a commie, but I used to kind of have kind of that philosophy of like, the world sucks, and like punk rock, let's break shit. I never really did break a lot of shit. I'm glad I didn't, but I thought it was kind of cool back then.
Can understand the
Yeah, I can understand kind of the attitude, like this kind of, teen angst, and like they'd say FSU or fuck shit up because it's like badass and all that kind of stuff. And, talking about the Sublime song, April 26, 1992, which is all about rioting and looting and stuff. Like, I love Sublime, and I thought that was kind of cool. I imagine a lot of people listen to that kind of stuff and will use that to think is like, yeah, well, that was obviously being on the right side of history after Rodney King. So, and I think all the rhetoric, I think it came from the 60s, but the kind of phrase that is like it's the voice of the unheard or something like that. People probably used that around Rodney King. I was too young to really remember much of that. But I guess that kind of attitude does kind of go in, and people use that to justify it. But I think they're still coming from a place of like nihilism and just being disenchanted, lost. Which I mean, I understand that completely. But when you kind of just don't care, you probably don't care that much about your life either. You probably are. If you're going into a situation like that, I think a part of you probably considers that yeah, I might die and maybe I don't mind.
I would feel like that Rosenbaum character, like obviously.
Yeah, I mean,
And he was
yeah,
from what I read,
yeah.
it's terrible. He was a terrible fucking human being.
Well, 19, I think he was 19 when he got convicted of 5 counts of, I don't know the details, I don't care to really, but it was like child sex abuse or
It sounded like rape
sexual
and
assaults.
stuff,
Yeah, I think it might have been like just plain old rape.
which
and
is sad because it was probably he was abused too.
Yeah, he was probably abused. Yeah, it's hard to imagine that he wasn't miserable and that he didn't have this crazy, excruciating battle going on. And from what I know about how he was acting in this incident, it was kind of like, it does kind of look like it. You couldn't be too surprised if what's going on in his head is like, yeah, I don't want to end it myself, but let this kid end it for me. Well, I mean, the kid's got a gun. Seems like he's willing to use it to defend himself. So, I mean, how else are you going? What else would you do if you wanted Kyle to shoot you, other than run after him, yelling obscenities and telling him that you're going to kill him?
Right.
It's like that. I hate to say these words, but it's kind of almost like he was asking for it.
It's true.
It's terrible.
That's why we
But
haven't done things like that.
I sure can sympathize at least. Like, it's because I can't sympathize with having done what we know that he did, but I can imagine that I would not want to live if I had done those things.
Someone else.
And it's hard also to think, like, if you have that kind of history, like, and you do want to live a long life and you're not trying to, like, find, forgiveness and mercy and really, really turn your life around and go in the complete opposite way where you're trying to, like, be on the straight and narrow, being righteous, like helping troubled youths not make the same mistakes you did. Like, if you have that kind of past and that's not the path you're on, it's hard to imagine why you would have a will to live.
Yeah, he had
If you didn't just want to do more evil shit.
11 counts of child molestation and
11? I thought it was 5.
Well, this one says 11. And inappropriate. This is newly released. Maybe this is a little older. The victims were 5 boys. That's maybe where you got the 5 from. 5 boys ranging from 9 to 11 years old, and including anal rape.
9 to 11? Holy.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I know people are against vigilante justice, and I am too, but it kind of worked out in this case,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of hard for me to not kind of look at it as like, no, I mean, when people want to try to make it's stupid to try to stress the point when you're defending Kyle that this guy had this history, but at the same time, like, I think it's fair to point out, like, let's not talk about this like it's some kind of crazy, objective tragedy. I mean, it is. I think it's a tragedy anytime anybody dies. Like, it would have been much better if he had done what I'm kind of suggesting, like, like really just taken this terrible past and tried to do everything that he could to be transformed into a good person and to do more good in the world than the harm that he had already done. Like that would have been better than him dying. But seems like that's not what he was trying to do, and I can kind of speculate that like that God might have even played a hand and that this guy happened to be one of the people that decided to put himself in that situation and make Kyle have to defend himself against you. The world did just lose somebody that has raped 11 kids.
Or five kids,
Oh,
but 11 counts.
oh, I see. That's what it was.
Yeah, but 5 kids between the ages of 9 and 11. Which because I just watched a documentary about this kid who was abused by his fucking uncles, and then when he finally like came out and said, "Oh, my uncles did it," then the dad said, "Oh yeah, they did it to me too as a kid." So the dad got abused by these people and let them around his kids. Like, no thought about it. It's a documentary. It's fucked up, and it's like, and then that cycle. The dad didn't abuse them, but the cycle kept going.
Yeah,
you know.
well, and I have to kind of imagine too that there is a little bit of a psychological mechanism of trying to be okay, trying to sort out what happened to you, and try to be like, well, yeah, it wasn't good, but I mean, I survived, so I'm not gonna like keep my kids away from their uncle.
It was so bad because it was 2 uncles and a
feels
cousin because the cousin had gotten attacked by one of his dad, the uncles, and so this poor little kid had gotten sexually molested by 2 uncles and a cousin by the time he was like 10. And so like it was all like, his behavior went bad, which is another thing I think about too when they want to throw kids on Ritalin and everything right away. It's like there are issues for the behavior sometimes. Like it could be a physical thing. It could be they are being molested and they're not telling anybody and they're acting out. But like, and that then it just goes down the whole like, yeah, like it just, are we doing this on purpose so that like kids can be easily abused? Because it's hard not to think about that anymore with the way the government and everybody's acting and with Epstein and all this stuff. Like,
yeah, and and kind of the grooming that you seem to be seeing in the culture and stuff like that, and when you look at it from like, I only know about these people because of Twitter, but the people who identify as MAPS,
yes,
and stuff like that. If I had to, I mean, I guess in my way of trying to work things out with my imagination, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of theory approximating like, well, because I think they're coming from a premise of like solipsism, like we make our own reality, right? Like there's a lot of examples that is kind of what's going on, everything from moral relativism to like the social constructionism ideas about like the patriarchy and I think the idea too that like that the reason why people even choose capitalism over communism is that like, well, we just haven't molded humanity in the correct way, and that's what we need to do. We need to align our consciousness collectively in such a way that we mold, because we create reality collectively, so we need to force our neighbors to create the kind of reality with us that we want to create with our consciousness and our, that kind of idea, that maybe their solution to the trauma of being abused as a kid would be, well, let's try to find a way to make it so that it's not really abuse. Let's try to make it wholesome and okay. And they'd be maybe trying to put some of that, like those sex positivity ideas into it. Seems like that's what those MAPS are doing. They're trying to say is like, we're just misunderstood and we never wanted to hurt anybody. It's like, don't care if your ideal was that you could do this and not hurt the kid. It's going to hurt the kid.
It seems like they're all psychologists too, which that's always, it's
they're
always
playing these
suspect
games.
of like, are you a psychologist because you're trying to heal your own wounds, or like?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that I saw that, and then I'm like, and people have the balls to say, Yeah, sorry, he is farting a storm. I don't know if you keep smelling that.
No, I'm
you
not
farting, honey. But they have it like all those people coming out where the people are like trying to like defend the map stuff, and it's blah blah blah. It's not about actually attacking them. It's just their it's just in their mind. But then it's like, and then they have the balls to say bring up age of consent stuff with libertarians. I'm like, yeah, we're the people pushing the boundaries here.
Whenever
like,
I see that, I am taking off the kid gloves. That's a terrible choice of words, but you know what I'm saying? Like whenever I see that shit, that obviously, I think. Well, no, you had made a comment on that thread, so I think originally people could comment. They changed it so that comments
they
were
turned it
only
off.
allowed like later on by the time I found the thread. But that thing where somebody from like the Libertarian Party of Connecticut, I think was what it was, commented on a, I think probably vax mandate sort of thing about fascism, and then everybody is trying to poke fun of like, oh, the Libertarian decided to come in and weigh in on
Yeah.
fascism. How interesting. And then of course they have nothing but bullshit platitudes to throw out about like, yeah, well, libertarians are actually the fascists though.
Always. And they're not
And-
responsible at all.
yeah. And they only pretend to believe in freedom because really the only thing that they want to do is all of the terrible things that we know Republicans want to do, like control women's bodies and give head to billionaires and smoke. But the libertarians, the difference between them is they want to smoke weed, and they disagree with age of consent laws. Of course, they always throw out age of consent laws, and yeah, I have no patience for that kind of thing. I'm happy. That's one of the only cases where I'm happy to be willingly and intentionally disingenuous in order to give them a heavy taste of their own medicine, because they want to try to use mental gymnastics to make that argument. I promise that I've got a lot more potential to use mental gymnastics to call them a pedophile, and I'm happy to do that. If you want to say that I only believe in freedom and decreasing the power of the state because I have a problem with age of consent laws, I am going to make an argument that the only reason why you would even speculate that is because age of consent laws are the only reason that you are not that's the only thing that's stopping them from messing with kids. Like,
That's fair.
yeah, I think that's in my opinion. It is fair. It is admittedly disingenuous, but I think it's fair in that case.
Sometimes you have to be just as ridiculous and like
Yeah,
disingenuous as you say, because it is just also
because they don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about consistency, facts, and logic. And yeah, I'm not gonna stray too far away from being consistent by any means. In fact, I will do that and then admit that I was being intentionally disingenuous to give them a taste of their own medicine. But
And
but
how many? Go on.
yeah, but the point is that it's like they are not willing. What's that quote? It's something like that. When I'm stronger than you, then I ask that. No, when you're stronger than me, I ask for freedom because that is according to your principles. And when I'm stronger than you, I ask for your submission because that is according to my principles.
Right.
It's like, yeah, there are people out there like that, and I don't know. It's hard because they aren't going to, they are not going, they're going to expect you to operate according to your principles, but then they are more than happy to not live up to those principles themselves. And
Well, especially
so-
like the age of consent, like, and then how many of those people would turn around and say, well, no, kids can take puberty blockers, and it's like, okay, age of consent for like that, but not for their own physical body and well-being. Like, and they think kids should transition because it's their right to, but then they'll bring up, oh, but you guys don't care about age of consent laws. It's like, well, neither do you, fuckers.
Yeah, that's a wild one too.
Okay, when I am weaker than you, I ask you for freedom because that is according to your principles. When I am stronger than you, I take away your freedom because that is according to my principles.
I
Thanks,
think
Colin.
I got that pretty close.
Yeah, you were pretty close.
I always mess that quote up, but because I just kind of have it's just a
Well, you
truth
know what it
it's
means,
like
yeah.
implanted in my head. It's like, yeah, I don't even have to think in those words to just kind of know what concept I'm being reminded of. But yeah, that's the thing.
Oh, it's from Dune. I need to read it.
Oh, I did not realize that. I think I have like 2 copies of those books because on 2 separate occasions somebody was like, "What? You've never read the science fiction novel? This is the best one ever. You need to read this." And I'm like, "That's cool. Maybe at some point I'll get a copy." And they'd be like, "No, take this copy. Take this copy. I don't care if I ever get it back. You need to read this." And I think that's happened like twice. So I have 2.
Better than none, I suppose. I only have the first one, so I'm at the. How many are there in the series? Like 3?
No idea. Probably at least 3.
Kind of wanted to read through it.
I think I started to watch one of the movie versions of it that I think I think that they might have made another one later that wasn't as bad because
Damn, there's 14.
I think the
21.
people who like them might not, they might not appreciate, because I don't even remember giving it much of a chance, but I started to watch one of the movies a while ago and just immediately was like,
It is kind of like, it is. I remember like even starting to read the book. It's kind of just slow, but I think I would have more of appreciation for it now, so I need to read it.
Well,
For people, Dune is awesome. It's Star Wars for people that listen to Tool.
well, I've always liked Tool and Star Wars, so I guess
you gotta read it or watch the new one.
I guess I have to, because, well, I don't need a special Star Wars just because I like Tool, because I like Star Wars. But in any case, that seems like enough information for me to determine I'd probably enjoy reading that book.
To start out, now that I know it's like I said, I think I'd appreciate it now more.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's kind of about government being shitty and stuff.
Yeah, and I know some of the memes that have been in reference to that, which is like it's like that if you control the pumpkin spice, you control the white women or something like that. I think that's from Dune, but it's like actually there's this stuff called spice that's kind of like a drug or maybe a nutrient or something like that. Maybe it's kind of like both.
Well, someone will tell us here in a minute.
Yeah.
What exactly is the spice?
Whatever it is, apparently it has it's something that if you control it, then you also control people because they're like dependent on it.
They need it so much.
Yeah, they need it either literally or addictively or something. Yeah, which is interesting because like that's probably getting at what. So I'm guessing most people probably should have read that to know better than to fall for a UBI, because that's what that sounds like, is that if you get to control people's allowance, then you get to control their behavior. That's kind of the point of an allowance, I think, when you're a kid, right? Is that like you can kind of use that, because when kids kind of need discipline, and it's often preferable to influence your kids' behavior with rewards than with punishments. But a UBI is like an adult allowance, which would understandably be used the same way, which might be okay if it's your parents holding your allowance over you, especially since they'll feed you anyway.
Were you talking about UBI?
Yeah, I was talking about, I was like, that seems like this concept of the spice should probably make people think a little bit more about their idea that UBI is a good idea.
So it's a psychedelic
Because it seems
drug.
like if you control the UBI, you control the people, or you control.
Oh no! If it's UBI, they won't control anyone because it will be like because it's all about, just it's for everyone. It's universal, so they
Right.
won't like do anything weird with that. That'll be for everybody.
Yeah, that's kind of the argument, is because if you want to say that if you want to say that that they will threaten to withhold your UBI in order to get you to comply with whatever kind of authoritarian policies that they don't want to like literally like force you at gunpoint to do, then they don't have to. It's a lot easier to just say we won't put the amount of money in your bank account that you depend on if you don't do what we say. But and then their argument is, well, no, but that's not UBI though. You don't understand. The UBI is all about you just get it no matter what. Yeah, but who's forcing them to not withhold it from?
I know, and who's controlling? Who is making it right now?
The people
So
with the power to take away everyone's money in the first place to redistribute
and they're
it.
doing it right now.
You trust them.
And they're doing it right now with making people quit and get fired. And it's like, so you trust those people to universally just not even what's going on now, they'll still give it to everybody.
And I used to kind of want to try to think along those lines that like if you had some kind of system that was completely tamper proof, like I would try to make up those kinds of things work in like an imagination about a robotic reality or something like that. Like you could have like robots that are that like you cannot override it. They are programmed to do nothing other than protect people from aggressive like initiatory violence. Basically like nap robots or something. But no, you still gotta think about it. Realize where things could go wrong. Who's forcing you to not make robots that do violate the nap? It
exactly, Thug Nasty. Or even people all this last year, the system's systematically racist. The institutions are systematically, white supremacists and this and that. And then it's like, but you want to give them all the power. You sit here and call them this, and then you want to give them all the power and control. Like it makes no goddamn sense.
I think it's really that's that double speak, right? Because I think that's why these people seem to just have broken brains, because in a sense they really do. They have been so hypnotized for so much time into believing things that don't actually work together. Like I believe this with full force and I believe that with full force, yet these things are contradictory. Therefore, I just can't even think anymore because
and they don't think
because you can't make sense of it. You can't.
It's just how they say it. Just how it is. It's just how it is.
It's a white supremacist system, and we need to give as much power to the system as possible because otherwise, white supremacists will get away with their crimes. What about the ones in the system that you're using to apparently stop white supremacists? But I mean, it's so cut and dry. So obviously their brains are broken because they couldn't possibly miss that otherwise.
Or even like thinking though, where they're like, corporations are too powerful. We need the government to, and it's like, you'll explain to them, you understand the corporation is that way because of the government. And sometimes they'll even say, yeah, I get that. That's why we need the government to change. And it's like, do you understand? The government will not go back on that ever. It will never change. Like,
I currently think I'm at a state of having all of my patience depleted with even trying to explain to leftists why the corporations are what they are because of the government, because you just can't get through to them on that point. Occasionally, out of like 1 million people whose deaf ears it falls upon, one person will be there ready to actually like ask you inquisitively about like, well, what do you mean? How does that work? And first, I don't assume they're asking in good faith, but then I will go ahead and answer anyway. Very rarely, though, but it has happened where they're like actually asking, and then when I give them an answer, they ask more questions, and they think that what I'm saying is interesting. Oh, you actually cared to possibly consider like taking your, like opening up your mind to the possibility that your ideology may have flaws and that it may be built on some faulty premises and things like that. Wow, that's such a rare gem. But other than that, like, you can't. According to them, Well, that's another one of those inconsistency things. Is like the government is evil because of the corporations and capitalism, but we also need the the government, because if we didn't have the government regulating the corporations, then they would get away with creating an unequitable society. And like, but they already control things, and it's not. And then they seem to talk about it as if we have a free market. Remember one of the first big like interactions where I had a reply tweet to something and I started actually getting some traction was from like an AOC thing. Like AOC had I think just been elected, and somebody and somebody had commented on that post. It's like started from the bottom, now we're here, and I just kind of like made some snide comment apparently early enough that it started getting a lot of views and stuff, and I just started getting just swarmed by all these leftists. That, as I remember, this one was called like Wind Horse or something. He just goes on this like he just immediately fires off like 5 comments like thread on my thing about unfettered capitalism and blah blah blah, and it make people hurt and be sad and all this, and it's like responsible for all the wars and all the bad things, and just insert just anything negative that you can think of, attach that to unfettered capitalism and what it does and always has done and how everybody knows that. And and of course, you know, it's hard at that point to get to what do you mean unfettered capitalism, and when have you ever seen anything like this? But I don't know, and it's a little bit of a difficult, it's a little hard to concisely explain exactly how all of this works if they were willing to listen in the first place. So it's so tiring.
Yeah, and they just automatic. I mean, even people who have seemed somewhat smart are under the guise of capitalism bad. When they're and I've started kind of not. I haven't started kind of not using the word as much. I mean, I still do when I'm using it like ironically and stuff, but you can't say laissez-faire because they don't understand that. And then you say,
And I can never remember exactly how to spell it.
right,
So
and exactly, and you can't
French.
say like free market because then they're like they don't understand what a free market really is either. Like they don't understand that word, even though that's the most simplest of fucking words. Because everything is so regulated in our lives that they like just can't even imagine that.
yeah, and it's interesting too because like, and I don't know. I think I always want to relate everything to my mom because she's like my frame of reference to how these people think, and
That's fair. 'Cause she's
Yeah.
older and
yeah, and she's actually open, and she does try to talk to me in good faith as much as you know the NPC takes over sometimes, but at least she knows me and we have a real relationship, which helps. But I mean, but it's hard to even grasp what they believe, and how they believe what they believe. But you know, there are certain things that are just taken for granted, such as the New Deal. Like she will always bring up like that her dad was in like a jobs program under FDR, and that she believes that the family would have gone hungry if it hadn't been for the New Deal. So therefore, you know, she can't be too critical of FDR because without FDR, you know. But then I will try to go all the way back to like, well, but the Federal Reserve System that was started by Woodrow Wilson was what started those hardships in the first place. And just because FDR did do this New Deal and things eventually got better, you're confusing, you know, correlation with causation. And one can argue that the Great Depression wouldn't have even dragged on for so long without all of that stuff. But it's just that accepted thing that is just nailed down, that says that's why the New Deal and FDR and progressivism is good, because unfettered capitalism leads to Great Depressions, and then and the only way out of that is to let these people control fascistically every aspect of the economy. They believe that, and then they believe in things like the Koch brothers. If you even want to talk about money and politics, or you want to talk about the Rothschilds and the Rothschilds and the
Of course.
Rockefellers and you know these kinds of elites and things like that. I mean, these left-wing people don't have anything to say or add to that, so the only thing they bring up is the Koch brothers, because according to them, I think the Koch brothers are the only like rich people in the world who have ever influenced politics in a negative way, and they're apparently the ones who control the American government,
All of it.
all of it, and everything that it does.
And they just want to make abortion completely illegal and just make people, they just want to do all these awful, terrible
Yeah.
anti-left wing things.
Yeah, and I've even tried to get to the bottom of the truth about the Koch brothers, and it's like, yeah, it's not a monolithic thing. They're by no means angels, but they're also arguably like not that bad compared to, I don't know, the Rothschilds, and Klaus Schwab, but yeah, there's corruption.
We
for
should
sure.
talk about that sometime too.
Yeah.
Ugh. I told my parents learned about it in Bible study with the WEF. I'm like, that's a good pastor or whatever, whoever did it.
Yeah, I'm kind of impressed too, because I feel like I can't even get into that with like my brothers that meet up and stuff like that, because like somebody will always be like, okay, let's not go down that rabbit hole and let's get back into the word now. It's like, not that they're rejecting it outright, but they don't really.
Just
Yeah.
trying to keep up.
That's why I'm gonna try to start a new group meeting with some of these people, and probably anybody can show up. And I am going to kind of be the leader, and I'm going to be the one that's like, okay, no, this is our topic, and we can talk, because there are all these things I want to talk about. And yeah, if it's my group, we can talk about whatever I want to talk
Exactly.
about. So yeah, we could talk about the satanic implications of the World Economic Forum and how they build their fucking building to look like the Tower of Babel. But
The whole thing. Did you want to take a break or keep going?
I guess
We could get into Astro World.
Yeah.
We could take a break and then do that, or we could keep going.
yeah, we could take a break. I think that could
Just to
probably.
get a little antsy in my pantsies.
Yeah. I'm starting to maybe feel like a break sounds
All right.
desirable.
We're
So,
gonna take a break for a while.
yeah, this is the intermission, and there will not be any orchestral music, unfortunately.
No, I'm gonna actually just end it. But we'll be back. We'll be back to talk, and hit me up on Twitter for other things you want us to talk about too.
Yeah, do
Someone
that.
mentioned the
Tell us-
UAP
and I'm not-
phenomenon.
And I'm not deactivated right now, so you can tag me as well if you want.
You're on there. Let me write this down really quick.
I can't imagine why anyone would tag me and tell me to talk about anything, because I'm gonna just ramble on anyway. But hey, if you feel like it, go ahead.
UAP phenomenon. That's such a hard word. And Lou's on there. Okay. I'll have to look all that up. All right. Peace out. We're taking a break. We will be back. We'll be back.